Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for tonight's Six Celebrate tour of Steinway Village. For those of you who don't know, Six Celebrate is a targeted citywide list of preservation priorities. The purpose of the program is to provide strategic resources to neighborhood groups to help them reach their preservation goals. The six selected groups receive HGC's hands-on help on all aspects of their efforts over the course of the year and continued support in the years to come. Applications for the 2024 Six Celebrate are now open. You can find out more information on the Six Celebrate website, 62celebrate.org. We have one more tour before 2023 ends. There's a walking tour of Mosholu Parkway this Saturday, December 9th. You can learn more and register at our website, hdc.org. If you have any questions about programming, you can contact me at marbulu@hdc.org. I would like to thank the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, City Council, New York State Council on the Arts, and the Ford Foundation for supporting Six Celebrate. And now I will hand it over to Bob Singleton to lead tonight's tour. Thank you.
And thank you, Michelle. My name is Bob Singleton, Executive Director, Greater Astoria Historical Society. I want to thank all of you for coming out this evening for a phenomenal opportunity to walk through the Steinway Mansion, to walk through the community. This is really something that we are very pleased in within our community. Just a bit of background in terms of myself. Besides running the Astoria Historical Society for nearly 20 years, I was given a distinct privilege of being the public tour guide at the Piano Factory. And over that period of time, I must have seen hundreds and hundreds of pianos being made. I met the people that worked on the floor. I escorted scores of people through the factory every month. But even more important than that, we were friends with Henry Z. Steinway, who was a member of the society, who actually studied history when he went to college. And in the summer, when he would take a break with the family, he actually gave us the privilege of going through the archives at Steinway Hall. And as you can imagine, we had a fabulous time scanning things. Whilst down the hall was an artist who was going to be playing at Carnegie Hall that day, practicing on a Steinway piano. So let's get started on this. We're going to get into the lecture itself. Let me see here. I can get this meeting recording out of the way. Okay. The Steinway community, the Steinways had a very important past. We believe that Heinrich Steinway, who started the family dynasty, was an orphan, as families would say, the story was told, and he was actually taught to woodworking so that as a young adult, he would not be a burden on the state. There was no education or anything. He never really learned English when he came to America with the family, but he had one fabulous skill, and that was making pianos. And he made them in his wife's kitchen. He was never given the privilege to become a member of the guild. What had happened, how they came to America, is that one of his sons was involved in revolutionary activities, came to New York City, and as thousands of other people at the time wrote back to their family in Europe, come to America, come to New York. This is a place we can be. This is a place where our gifts can flower. And Heinrich took that with the entire family, except the oldest brother, who stayed behind, started another company. But they all came to New York, and each one took a specialty. One person worked on cases, another one worked on keys, and what have you. They wanted to learn the American way. And then what they did is they created a piano company, and then they had a very clever marketing idea. They would go to a concert artist and say, "What do you want from a piano?" And they were kind of surprised because the artist would merely have, pianos, try different pianos, would discuss this with the Steinways. They would experiment. Finally, the artist said, "That's really great. Well, that's what I want." Steinway said, "Can we put your name on our advertising?" The artist said, "Of course." That was the key to success. That was how the family got started. Now, the reason I went into the background is that formed the basis of what we call the Steinway settlement. It was a planned community, privately financed by the Steinway family, not a company town. It's only a small percentage of the people actually worked at Steinway. An excellent example of a planned community, integration of commercial, residential, and infrastructure components. We still have not found the master plan for the entire settlement. We are just now, researchers discovering who the various architects were. And this was one of the first communities that New York City tried to make a landmark community. Unfortunately, some people within the community was fed very bad information about landmarking. They said that it will take away your home from you. It will take away what away from your family. And one woman at a meeting stood up and said she refused for landmark designation, even though, and I got this directly from a person who was there, a person who was 3 generations within a community, he had said most of the community had wanted it. And it is our hope that in the future, great organizations such as historic districts councils and others will be able to change people's opinions, because there's a phenomenal amount of the original fabric there, which you're going to see this evening here. Again, the Steinway Sons themselves, we owe a great deal of what New York is today to the Steinway piano, because they were the ones who left the legacy of New York as the world capital of culture. But they went beyond that. When they created their community, all the way out here in Queens, there had to be some way for people to connect with Manhattan, for people to come to see the pianos, for the workers themselves to get back into the city. And so they got involved in transportation. And a great deal of the transportation network of New York City was created by the Steinways. As a matter of fact, they put an amusement park in what is today North Beach, which is, or was then North Beach, which is today LaGuardia Airport. Again, with the legacy of Steinway is very rich. Pianos are one portion of it. They contributed very greatly to making New York City what it is today. Their instruments, if you go to a concert, 97% of the time, you will hear a Steinway piano. The concert artists and recording artists love this instrument. It's a joy to play on. And if you see a concert or recording and watch somebody playing a Steinway piano, you can see a fabulous bond between this fabulous instrument and the incredible talent of the artist. It has a name, had a name almost from the beginning as the instrument of the immortals. Steinway Hall, the original Steinway Hall, was the beginning of the of opening up the doors to New York City becoming a world cultural place, because artists, when they came in from Europe, heard about Steinway and wanted to start their concert venues at Steinway Hall. And only when Carnegie Hall and other venues were built, which were much larger, did Steinway Hall relinquish its position as the capital of culture in New York City. But culture in New York City got its start at Steinway Hall. And this is the man, this is Heinrich's son, William Steinway, an absolute genius in so many different areas, a businessman, a transportation executive, an industrialist, an artist. This man was certainly a fabulous, this is one of the great giants, in my opinion, that made New York City what it is today. Now, when they came out, they planned things very carefully. There was a tall windmill that was pumping water from the ground for an orchard, and they actually climbed to the top of the windmill, took some photograph equipment with them, and did this incredible panoramic view. This would be Manhattan over here. This would be where LaGuardia Airport is today. And this would be the East River and the beginning of Long Island Sound. And this is a map that corresponds to it. A restored copy of this, if you have a chance to get to the Steinway factory, is in the lobby at the factory. And so they planned everything, as you can see, very, very carefully. When we do the study of the area, there are major streets here. This is Astoria Boulevard, which is the main road before Grand Central, the main road going out to Long Island. This is Steinway Street, which was built to link the Steinway settlement to the street grid at Northern Boulevard. And these are some other streets and avenues that constitute the community. This is the Steinway Mansion. We'll get into the Steinway Mansion a little bit later. This was where the settlement itself was built. Before they started selling anything, they developed the area. Here you can see they already had a trolley barn here. Here was their factory. Everything was laid out with lots. And you can see already at this period of time, they had housing. They started having housing for the employees, but only a small fraction of the people that lived here were Steinway employees. This was not a company town. And our friend Henry Z used to kind of get a little annoyed when people would call it a company town. He said it was never a company town. And this was the flyer they had. If you looked for sought a healthful home away from the city, away from pandemics, this was your place that you should move to. We had in these period of time, there's something called aerial views, bird's eye views, where they actually had drew a community if you like flew over it, say in a balloon or something. And this is the community in the 1890s. It shows notable homes. It shows businesses. We actually sat down with this. We have several copies of this, and you can see there are numbers in here. You can see the kind of detail that's in here. There's numbers here. And then we were able to correspond these numbers to the chart of both the companies, the churches, the civic places, the schools, everything. And we have about 90% of the list complete. And again, how we went from this map to an aerial view and into a regular view, this is how we were able to convert this map into a modern grid. Now we're going to start with one of the interesting things. The Steinways did not just make pianos here. They encouraged other companies to come here. One of the companies that was here was the Astoria Silk Works. Silk was a very, very important product at the times. Before you had all the polyester and what have you. You had cotton, silk, relatively few choices, but silk was always considered to be a high-end product. And the people that worked in silk were people that were very, very, again, high-end product in terms of skills to be able to work and weave this cloth. So there are several silk works in Queens. This is the one that the Steinways had started. These were the housing. The other interesting thing about this place was the housing. They didn't have anything that was sort of, thrown together kind of houses. They actually hired architects. And when I used to do walking tours, I had people from, around the world in these tours. And people would comment to me. I remember one couple was on a tour. They were from Switzerland. And they said, their homes in Switzerland look like this. And I mentioned this to a researcher. And now we're starting to actually get names of the architects. Now, of course, these buildings are not the way they looked originally. There's been a lot of changes to them. But again, it's really interesting because you had these fabulous buildings. You had schools. You had sewers. You had paved streets. You had amusement parks. Access to the water and streetcar lines, which would take you back to the city. So for working people, this was one of the most ideal communities in this country. And this is, again, another view of the Astoria Silk Works. And you see that red arrow. I'm going to have a picture of Steinway Street, which is the street here in the front there. On the left would be the corresponding location of that red arrow. And again, you can see here's Steinway Street, nice streets, wide streets. It's paved. There are trees along the streets. There are fire hydrants. There are streetcar lines in here. This would be an ideal place for somebody to move. And when you think that only about 10, 15 years ago, this was a cow pasture. Can you give you an idea of how much money they had and what kind of dreams that they were able to bring to fruition? This is what the same area looks like today on Steinway Street. And again, that's the red arrow where the Silk Works was at one time. It's really interesting. Heinrich himself was illiterate. And I think that always bothered him. And when the family was able to put together some money, they were able to, put in infrastructure into this place, and they built schools. And this is actually the Steinway School, PS 8. This is what it looks like today. And then of course, the community outgrew PS 8, and the Steinways donated land and built PS 84 in 1902. And it's really, really cool. We actually had an opportunity to teach in this school about the Steinways. And it's quite an interesting thing for us to be able to to walk through a place that the Steinways gave to the community and talk about the legacy that the Steinways left on so many different levels. Again, we have some further buildings here on 41st Street on the Silk Works. Interesting, the Steinway Reformed Church is a legacy of the Steinways. There was a small church here, and they built this church, even though they were not Reformed faith. So they contributed money to all kinds of levels of infrastructure for the community. This church is really, really interesting because there's a secret inside this church. And we've discovered that there may be the original Steinway pipe organ. Originally, it was in St. Thomas's Church, which was down near Canal Street. Now, St. Thomas's, of course, is on Fifth Avenue. This was the Steinway Hall, the concert venue from the 1890s up until the time of Carnegie Hall. And you'll see that there are pipe organs here. Now, according to Steinway, Steinway left a diary. And according to his diary, he donated the pipes from Steinway Hall to the Reformed Church in this area back here. And these are curtains. We had an opportunity to give a talk at this at the church a few weeks ago, during Open House New York, and I pulled the curtains back, and this is what I saw behind here. Those are pipes from a pipe organ, and those are big pieces of wood that were part of the decoration for probably for the church. We're now working with the American Guild of Organists, New York City chapter, to be able to find someone that can, verify that this is the original pipe organ. And if so, this would be a fabulous find because this played a very important role in making New York City, as I said, the capital of culture in this country. A side view of the church with the rectory behind it. The rectory's been sold about 20 years ago, but the people who live in it really love the building and maintain it very, very well. Now we're going to look at the various types of housing that the Steinways had. This is again a humble house. It's a two-family house in the 1880s. It still exists, and it existed right here until about 15 years ago when somebody bought the right side here and the left side, and built this item between the two sets of buildings. This is going on continuously now within the community. Now we're in the main street. It was really, again, very interesting. They had a residential district, they had a commercial district, they had a manufacturing district where the jobs were, they had waterfront parks, what have you. This was a planned community by every stretch of the imagination. And most of these buildings are still intact from the original Steinways. This is really neat. I got this picture here. And this is actually from about 1900, the same location. And as you can see, the buildings are almost exactly the same, except for the storefronts. This is from that map that I showed you, the bird's eye view map, Stein's Hall and buildings, again, commercial buildings. And this is what it looks like today. It's been modified, but the buildings are still there and could always be restored back to their original condition. This is at the end of the block. And again, on to the left, where it was more marshy, it was swampy, it was near the waterfront, was the commercial district where the manufacturers were, where the Steinway piano factory was. To the right was the residential area. Now, this is the other side of the street. Now, the building on the left, it was torn down about 3 or 4 years ago, was the very, very first building on Steinway Street. It was sort of a multi-purpose place. It was the post office and the very first store of the area. And then this building, we believe, was the very first library. So the Steinways opened up their own library, the Steinway Public Library. That later merged in with a number of other libraries in Long Island City, which is Western Queens. Long Island City was a separate city, like Brooklyn and New York City. 3 cities combined to form New York City in 1898. But the Long Island City Library then consolidated with Jamaica and with Flushing libraries to make the New York City Public Library, which is the largest circulating library in this country. And it's really interesting. It was started by an illiterate immigrant, and to this day it has programs for immigrants. And for many people, that was the one place where they had an opportunity to see the broader world, the world of books, the world of letters. As I said, the Steinway legacy on so many different levels is absolutely phenomenal. This is one of the first envelopes. They actually had their own. The Steinway Post Office still exists. It's on Broadway. It's not in the Steinway area, but it's still called the Steinway Station, the post office. This is where we believe the horses were kept for the mail delivery. And this is something really interesting. William Steinway went back to Germany on a number of occasions, and he ran into a fellow named Gottlieb Daimler, who said, I want to show you something. Daimler was an inventor. He was involved in inventing automobiles, the very first automobiles. They spent a day riding through Germany on a very, very early automobile from the 1890s, the original like Mercedes-Benz, if you will. He fell in love with it. He said, we need to put automobiles in America. Well, they started a factory. This is the back end of the factory. The front burned down, but this is the back end of the factory. It was not successful. Why? Because American streets were terrible. There were mud. You needed a team of horses to go anywhere in this country. And so this country was delayed a few decades until there was a big effort about 1905, 1910 to improve the streets to accommodate automobiles. So this factory made one car, and most of the engines went into making boats. So when people talk about New York, I say, well, here's one thing you don't know about New York. The beginning of the automobile age is not Detroit. It's New York City, specifically, it's Long Island City, specifically, it's the Steinway settlement. This, my friends, is where the automobile culture started in our country, in this building that nobody really knows about unless they study books and read about it. And this is what the factory initially had looked like. And you can see it says Daimler Motor Company. That back building is still there. The front of it is now, it was a fire, it destroyed it, and now it's a catering hall. And again, here's the streetcars, the Steinway and Hunters Point. Hunters Point is where the Newtown Creek, they had a Newtown Creek where Brooklyn and Queens sort of touch, and that's where a ferry used to go to Manhattan. Of course, that's where the number 7 train is, and the Long Island Railroad goes under there, and the Pennsylvania Railroad goes under there too. But here's the streetcar line that they had for the area. Now it's become housing. And this is the factory, absolutely incredible. The factory was along the waterfront. They brought wood. Wood is very heavy. And so what they do is in the spring, they would tie this wood into big rafts, float it down from New England, float it down from Canada into the Long Island Sound and into this location. And here was a canal that they broke the raft apart, took the logs down here, and here was a sawmill. And then what they would do is they would then stack up everything. When wood is green, there's nothing you can do with it. So the wood had to cure for like a year or two before people could use it. And this has a fabulous future because in this location, right next to the factory, this is the factory. In fact, half the factory was sold because they really did the production numbers of pianos is far less than what it was 100 years ago. So it's vacant land. Robert De Niro now is opening a film studio, Wildflower, on Leicester Creek and 19th Avenue. And this was the creek where all the logs for the pianos went into. So it's really fabulous that this location, which played an important role in culture and arts, the piano now has a fabulous future for the 21st century Robert De Niro film studio. And we hear a lot about this. This is a picture of what the factory looked like when it was first built in the 1880s. This was the foundry, which was now the studios are going to be here. And this was the shop where they assembled the pianos. And this is what it looks like today. Well, again, this part is gone. This is where De Niro's studios, but this is the factory as it stands in today. And this is the voicing. This is where they convert a piece of furniture into a musical instrument. And they also have restoration at the factory on the right there, where if you have an old piano, you can bring it there and they'll make it look like and sound like a new piano. And there's also, this is one of the really fabulous things when I gave tours there, the Browns used to have a concert, or various artists would come to give concerts. So, and all the employees would attend these concerts. I took this picture, I was behind them, watching this concert. It's just fabulous, like you're giving a tour in the morning and stick around, Bob. At noon, five Browns are giving a concert. On the right is something called the Vault. This is where the most exquisite, the most expensive pianos are kept in a showroom. Some of these instruments go for hundreds of thousands of dollars. The fabulous veneer and the artwork that's done on them. This is really sort of the holy grail of the world of music. There's only 3 people that have to touch the codes to be able to open up the lock. There's no key or anything like this. Sometimes when I gave the tours, somebody would leave the door open, and I'd say, "Come on in, guys, check this out." And people were just like sitting there looking at just how marvelous this thing was. Now, there's so many dimensions to Steinway. For example, this was the stables. Okay, this was down from the mansion. Today, the stables are the Modern Art Foundry, and that's a building right there behind the red car. We had a holiday party with the folks that ran the foundry last year. If you've been to Central Park, so Alice in Wonderland, that's an example of their work. Their work's all around the world. They're considered to be one of the most elite art foundries in the world. And it's so fabulous that you have this, again, this kind of skill, this kind of activity, a block away from the Steinway factory. Absolutely incredible. And this is the inside of the foundry. And again, that gives you an example of the exquisite work that is done at the foundry. And they're really wonderful people, really, really great people. If you ever have an opportunity, you might, they have a website. So maybe sometimes they give tours. I don't know, but you can always ask. Now, we're going to talk about the mansion a little bit later. But I did want to give a picture. This is what the mansion used to look like up until about 10 years ago. We'll talk about this in a bit. We're going to go through the neighborhood again. The mansion's down by the foundry, but we're going to come back again now. Again, look at the exquisite kind of housing that they built here. Incredible stuff here. This is what it looks like today. This was the main street that they tried to landmark, and you can still see the names of the family members on the side of the building, Elbert Street. Which is now 40th Street. Beautiful, beautiful neighborhood. I mean, when I talk to the people here, they're kind of ambivalent, but I think with some urging, with some opportunities, they may be interested in landmark designation again. And again, we're going forward now. The picture, of course, from the series of 1940. You can see how the decor changes over time. The buildings become more difficult to maintain, and so they get rid of the fancy work and stuff. And this is what the building looks like today, stripped of all of its embellishments, but it's still being used as a store after 130, 140 years. This is something, every time you turn around, there's something new about the Steinways. They were one of the first places in the country to have a kindergarten. I think there was second. There one was in College Point, was another German manufacturer, but they were the second kindergarten in the country. That's of course a German concept, and originally it was a church, and then I believe they probably looks like they raised it up a story for the kindergarten. And of course, it was torn down at some point. I think probably in the 1950s, 1960s. Again, exquisite housing. Okay, this actually is 1920. Original owners, probably many of them were still there, so these houses were not changed that much. But now you can see how over time the original fabric is being eroded. This is a sad story. This is I've always loved this house. On the tours, I used to give the tours. I used to walk by this house. This is what it originally looked like, or its original plan was. When I walked by the house a couple of weeks ago, just to kind of familiarize myself with the area, there's a big construction fence. This house is going to be torn down, if it not already has been torn down. You see the big piece of lawn there. It's just too valuable as a house to some people. Here's another beautiful house. We actually met the lady that has this. She's been the 3rd or 4th generation there. And it's been modified, but it's still beautiful. And this is what it originally looked like. Absolutely incredible. 1880 is the date on it. Now we're up to the Steinway factory on Ditmars Boulevard. What happened was they thought the wood, they were too close to the waterfront, and they thought that wood did not dry properly. So they had some additional land about 5 or 6 blocks from the waterfront, and they built a second factory on Ditmars Boulevard, where they could work on the wood and have it more stable and make a better piano. They gave up the factory up here. With the number of pianos being made today is a fraction of what it was. I think the peak of pianos was 1920, because of course we got movies and phonographs and everything. So they sold this, and now it's actually an apartment building right here. Okay, Pistilli Grand Manor. And there's still homes, some of the more luxurious homes for either the managers or the managers of the various businesses. This is the Oaks Mansion. A shame that this building is gone. This is what replaced it about 20 years ago or so. And again, when you walk around the neighborhood, if you look at the old flyers, the advertising stuff on the right, and you see the pictures from 1940, you can figure out what the address is, and then of course you can see what it looks like today. See, but there's always hope, that these buildings can be restored. And take a look at various neighborhoods. Take a look what's going on in Brooklyn. Take a look what's going on in various parts of Manhattan or the Bronx, what have you. So, I do think that there's a lot of fabric here, and I do think that a good portion of this will survive. Now we're going to talk about the Steinway Mansion. This is an incredible, incredible place here. The Steinway Mansion was originally built by an optometrist. The name escapes me right now, but he passed away. It was built about 1850. Now, again, one of the reasons that the Victorian style is today very, very considered to be very, very elite or very, very welcoming. But when the Victorian style was first introduced, it was considered to be nouveau riche. Basically, what would happen is instead of hiring an architect like everybody in Manhattan did, they would talk to usually a young guy whose father had a carpentry business or built houses, and he'd have a catalog. And in the catalog would be all kinds of pictures, like, how do you want your windows to look? What kind of footprint do you want for your floor? What kind of a gas light would you like? What kind of a chandelier would look good? And these people would, they have no knowledge of style or anything. They just say, that looks nice. Oh, I'll buy that. And the Victorian style initially had a very, very sort of a negative kind of connotation to it. It's like people had no taste and just picked everything, just threw it together into a mix, and proudly showed their wealth. Well, over time, the Victorian style became something that's highly, highly desirable, and this mansion was built over the Long Island Sound. You can imagine how beautiful when it first opened in the 1850s, 1860s, and see all these sailing ships and all the ships that went along the Sound. It must have been just a phenomenal, phenomenal view from that tower up there. And this is what it looked like up until about 10 years ago. It was a New York City designated landmark. It is on a National Register of Historic Places. Unfortunately, the Steinway Mansion has had some changes. As you can see, this was owned by the Halberian family. The story was told that one of the family members was a young guy that would go with his friends up to North Beach along a trolley back to about 1900, and to see this big mansion on top of the hill. I think at this point, the Steinways had pretty much left this to move back to Manhattan. And he said, someday I'm going to have that place. And his friends teased him and what have you. But what he did is when the place was on sale, he was Armenian, had an extended family, and everybody moved in and pitched their money together. And they were able, over a period of time, to get a loan, to pay it off. And Mike Halberian, who was the son of the fellow, actually lived in this mansion up until about 20 years ago, when we had a bad blizzard. I think it was in December, January, and he passed away. They couldn't get the ambulance, couldn't come up the hill to take him to a hospital. And at that point, his daughter and son inherited the place. They lived outside of New York, and they sold it to developers. I have a lecture on the inside of the mansion. We'll discuss, the Astoria Historical Society, www.ast, AstoriaLIC.org. We'll show our link at the end, and we give these lectures at least once a year. This chandelier could be raised or lowered. This is part of the entrance lobby. The story was told that William Steinway would put a piano there, and a woman would show up, a mother would show up with either a son or a daughter, and they would play for William Steinway. And he would comment on their skill. And if he felt that there was talent, he would then help their careers. So again, every place you turned, if you know the backstory of this place, it's just absolutely phenomenal. Now, when we heard the mansion was for sale, we had put together something called the Friends of Steinway Mansion. And we, have my business background, and I said, well, look, we have to have it to get people's attention, to get support, we have to make it more than, let's save this old house. And then people would say, well, fine, who's going to pay for that old house? So we had to make part of a larger picture. And considering that Steinway Factory was there, we said, you know what? Queens is at the cusp of becoming revitalized. And because of what was happening in Long Island City and Hunters Point, if you saw at that period of time, that was sort of an industrial area, a transportation area that had seen better days. It was still a strong neighborhood with great people, but New York City, everything has to reach its maximum use, as certain people think, and it became developed. And now that area is generating a lot more income than it did, a few decades ago. So I said, fine, my background's in business, I have an MBA and all that kind of stuff, and I love history. So I was able to combine the knowledge of the history, the love of history, with my business background, worked in Wall Street and what have you. And I said, put together a proposal that this area could be revitalized and bring in jobs, tourism. I said, you have people from around the world make the pilgrimage to the factory. And they actually ask me, they know about the mansion. I have no idea how somebody from Germany or somebody from Italy or Spain knows about the mansion, but is the mansion open? Says, no, it's a private residence. And, they're like, okay. But I think that this would be a really, really great opportunity. So we put together something called the Friends of Steinway Mansion, and we got in touch with the elected officials. We got in touch with the community board. We got in touch with the nonprofits. We got in touch with Steinway and Sons, and we said, folks, let's all work together and see what we can do around making the mansion itself the center of attention. And they say, well, it's great to go on these, have the pub crawls for if you want to get the word out to people. Well, we did. We had our pub crawl. We had our little business cards and all this kind of stuff. And suddenly something happened. The new owners submitted plans to the Landmarks Commission that they wanted to use the land around the mansion. They know the mansion's landmark, they couldn't touch it, but in their minds, the land was not being utilized to its maximum degree around the mansion. And I got copies of both models of, here's the mansion. This was their lawn of the mansion. This was 41st Street. This was from another angle. Again, that's the street back there. And these are head north, and this would be toward the east. And so what the landmarks did is, here's the footprint of the mansion. Here are the warehouses. They said, okay, remove all the land around the mansion and put tie beams between your warehouses and a wall that's going to hold up the mansion. Warehouses built on 3 sides, approved by the New York City Landmark Commission. This was the lawn. This was something where Michael Habarian had said to me, what a great place for, an open lawn. You could have fairs here, you could have carnivals here, you could have all kinds of wonderful things here. And this was where the lawn used to be. And here you can see that they built warehouses all around the mansion. This is the process of the mansion that's being destroyed, the lawn being destroyed from the mansion. And it shows how close they were. This is the north of the mansion itself. Again, this used to be a lawn at one time, and they just put a retaining wall, with on the mansion's basement itself, so they're linked together. And then they put here, there's 3 warehouses that went into this location. And this is what it looks like when it's finished. And this is the north side, all the warehouses that was built on the former lawn of the mansion. And this is what the mansion's being used for today, for parties. The Friends of Steinway Mansion fell apart. We tried for years. We're still trying to find an adaptive reuse for the mansion. As I said, you can see it went on the market in 2011. In 2014, it was sold and the current owners bought the property not for its use as a concert venue, as a cultural venue, as a place of education, as a place of inspiration, as a place for tourism come from around the world. They bought it as an investment. Warehouses and storage were built on it. However, the Sal Lucchese had said, who owns the property, and I never got into any fight with him. He's a business guy, and he does what business guys do. And he said he'd absolutely, entertain an idea to change the mansion into a public space. But unfortunately, we did not have the key people within the community to help us create this, to fund this into something different.
Who are you? You're gorgeous.
And what I'm going to do now is to play something here about the mansion, which we wrote at the end of it. Whoops. Let me get this moving here. 5 minutes, 4 minutes. Thank you. Are there any questions?
We have one in the chat. Also, real quick, when you couldn't remember someone's name earlier, someone commented that the name is Benjamin Pike.
Oh, thank you.
But also the question, did you ever explore engaging famous pianists from around the world who prefer to play on Steinways to become an advisory group to help with fundraising?
We did not. You start at the next block. You start at the next corner. You start across the East River. Now I've got my comments showing up in front of everybody. Before you start the artists from around the world. And again, this was pretty much known by people. But if I came from another country, I would say, well, that's wonderful. What are you doing for it? And we did not have a core that was interested, and it really surprises me in a city like New York that a core of people could not be put together. It was really interesting. Somebody had actually wrote an article for the New York Times contrasting the Steinway Mansion fate with, I think, Langston Hughes in Harlem, where a young lady came to New York, saw that the place might be torn down because everybody tried to use it as a venue, failed, and she just went out and raised tens of thousands of dollars, and it saved it. And in this location here, we could not get any. We initially had a lot of verbal, encouragement, and then once they heard that that a means was being put together to develop the location, the support evaporated. Any comments? Anybody other questions? But by the way, once you get there's a name here, you have a chance to play that back at home if you can get the video, and just dub the sound on it so you can see it's just beautiful, poignant music. And I'm sorry you couldn't hear it. Any other questions? Three chats.
Is the house without its surroundings still relevant? I think, but does LPC? Sorry, John, I'm not sure what you're trying. I believe that the house is still landmark, but the property wasn't, correct?
Well, that's correct. Yeah, the house is a landmark, and yes, I mean there's no doubt about it. I mean, there's like 20 rooms in this house. There's 3 stories, what have you, and even now, we could go to the guy that has the property. I mean, he's developed it with his warehouses, and say, okay, here's money for it, and then we can go to the elected officials and say, okay, would like to put in programs here. People from all around the world know about this mansion, and also this would be a great educational opportunity for young people to be able to, learn music and what have you. Or a venue within a concert venue has great acoustics, or just sort of civic groups meeting here and stuff. I mean, there are so many opportunities, so many ideas that are being unmet. And yet now, money in this country is being, channeled to other areas. I mean, there's a lot in terms of the budget. So I'm sure that's going to be another concern, which is okay. We need to feed people, we need to clothe people, and that comes first. And everybody agrees. But I do think that we're smart people. This is a great city. This is a great nation, great culture. We are used to being able to do the impossible with style. And I think if we can build bridges and dams and railroads and interstates and buildings, and discover things, I think we can do something with this place that would benefit an awful lot of people. Anybody else?
You had mentioned that they were open to doing tours again. Can you give any more information at this time about that?
You mean Steinway?
Yeah.
Well, Steinway is COVID hit, that's the store, the public tours I was giving stopped at COVID. And there were actually some people who were kind of sick in that last tour. And I was like, yes, we don't need tours and stuff. And I think they reevaluated that and they give tours, they don't give tours. I mean, this is going back, generations. And so they decided not to give tours. But they do give opportunities for say an organization that would be interested in buying some piano, like a school or the other thing too is like you get some of these organizations that are doing fundraising for a nonprofit, and you could say, well, look, if you could reach a certain goal, then maybe we can give you a tour at the Steinway Piano Factory, and maybe some of the donors might be able to get a Steinway piano or something like that at a good price, whatever. I mean, things can happen, but in terms of public tours, I don't see that as a foreseeable thing, probably for another generation. And that's the way it is. It's always been like that. The pendulum swinging back and forth. Anybody else?
What can HDC do to get a village landmarked? Some problems with owners present, elected officials. So yeah, where are we in the process of trying to get Steinway Village landmarked again? Is it the issue with electeds, with people who live in the neighborhood?
A whole bunch of things. I mean, I do think it is capable. I mean, I would not be spending time involved in preservation and stuff if I didn't think that there was some avenue to be followed. But I think charity starts at home, and I do think the preservation community really needs to be able to reinvent the benefits of landmarking. We had a symposium once just for the fun of it, and we put a bunch of people involved in preservation communities, successful preservation communities, and we put a real estate broker on that platform. And I said, okay, let's hear your arguments. Because that real estate broker, once the preservationists leave, will show up with his card the next day and say, well, this is a different way of looking at it. And it really is something that we all need to work together to improve our pitch, to improve the benefits. And I tell you, the real estate brokers would come along if they knew that they could sell houses for a lot more money than what they're getting right now. I think they would buy into it. So this is something that we need to sit down and reinvent ourselves. Charity begins at home. It's the preservation community, and I'm ready to sit down. I'm ready to. I think what we need to do is we need to reinvent the landmarks, and come up with some new ideas. We're smart people. New York's a great city. And I think I have very, very little doubt that some new ideas and new directions will be formulated, which will be successful.
And to just continue that thought, so we are working with the group to discuss those various different types of ways. We will be organizing the classic preservation 101 within the neighborhood, but then also expanding to other things like bar crawls or scavenger hunts to try and engage people in various ways, just getting them more interested in the history of the neighborhood before talking about, should we continue to try to get it landmarked. We need to get people engaged first. So we will be doing that in the winter and the spring.
Well, getting people engaged is, of course, but we're sort of an island in a big kind of choppy sea out there, and what we need to do is we need to be able to realize the environment which we're working in, and see how we can address things. Because again, a lot of people say, well, there's other urgent problems that are facing us, housing, food, what have you, and they're going to say, you talk about landmarking. Well, gee, that's nice, but we've got these other problems, these other issues. And so we need to be able to come up with some new ideas and new concepts. We cannot continue back in the 60s and 70s. It's a different world now. And I think we can do it. Talk to people at Steinway. Maybe they can, maybe you can talk with or talk with the artists that play Steinway pianos. Even that's even better. Hey, you were on that stage. People loved the music, that you're playing, and you're playing that because of this great tradition of people that worked and lived in these places and created this place. Maybe you can give something back. There's all kinds of different venues, but we have to come up with some new ideas. There's no doubt about that. But we'll be successful if we do. Anybody else?
Any other questions?
Okay. Well, thank you. I would suggest playing this with the piece of music. This happened before. My apologies for not matching the music. You can actually get this piece of music. There's a YouTube video that I used, and you can play it. It's about 4 minutes, and it's just absolutely poignant to hear this piano playing this piece of music, or Steinway piano with the Steinway piano with the family and the mansion itself. But if folks, if you're interested, again, here is our whoops. That's us, Greater Astoria Historical Society. And by the way, next Saturday we have, or next week, we have a holiday party. We're going to have Mike Fink of WPLJ. And we have a lot of fun there. He's still a broadcaster up in Westchester. So go www.astorialic.org. I'd like to see you guys in the future. If you have any ideas for tours or anything like that, get in touch with us. Books, be happy to talk with you. Anything?
We do
Is that
have
it?
one more question. If you
Yeah.
have, what is the big former factory near Socrates Sculpture Park related story? Question mark.
Is that the Suevo's warehouse? What was it? What factory is it again? Well, wait, what was it? What's the question again?
Near Socrates Sculpture Park.
There's a big factory.
Big former factory.
Oh, former. Yeah, that's the Sommer piano. Now, that's another interesting story. Sommer piano made uprights, Steinway made grands, and the two of them were friends. I actually met the Sommer family also, lovely people. Sommers were interesting. They're actually from Alsace-Lorraine. They're French Germans, but they had a close relationship with each other. And I was actually inside that building. They had the last coal furnace in Queens. But we were up in the roof, a fabulous view from up the roof of that building. Again, it's part of our industrial legacy. We have such fabulous legacy in Queens, in Long Island City. But okay, well, I thank all of you for your time, and I hope to see you in other programs. Anything else, ma'am?
No, that was it. Thank you very much to you, Bob. Thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. Again, as a reminder, we have a in-person walking tour this Saturday of Parkway, sorry. And yeah, stay in touch. Thank you very much, and have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye now.